Hi everybody, this is your narrator Ali, and I hope you are ready to relax to our story today. Tonight, we will follow a young samurai named Tomodata, whose path of strict duty bends under the weight of a love as fragile and as enduring as the green willow trees that sway over a lonely moor. Let your mind grow quiet as we ride with him into storm and memory. Chapter 1. The Lord of Noto's Charge. In the northern province of Noto lived a powerful lord, a daimyo feared by his enemies, and served with devotion by many warriors. Among these retainers, none was more admired than Tomodata. He was young and finely trained. In the court, he moved with easy grace, dancing to the music of flutes and drums. On the practice ground, he excelled in archery, swordplay, and all the manly arts. His voice was pleasant, his face handsome, and his manner kindly. Because he was generous with his wealth and gentle in his speech, both rich and poor loved him. One autumn, the Lord of Noto needed a trusted emissary. A delicate mission awaited, involving journeys through rough country and perhaps the borders of hostile lands. He summoned Tomodata to his audience chamber. The room was large and quiet. Painted screens showed pine trees and cranes. The daimyo asked whether Tomodata was loyal. The samurai replied that his loyalty was already proven. The lord then asked whether Tomodata loved him. The young man knelt, declaring his deep devotion. Satisfied, the daimyo gave his command. Tomodata was to ride out at once, carrying a message whose importance outweighed his life. He must not spare his horse, nor fear mountains, storms, or enemy territory. He was to ride straight and return quickly. Above all else, the daimyo added a curious warning. He must not look any maiden directly in the eyes. If he broke that rule, it might lead his heart astray from its duty. Tomodata bowed deeply, accepting the burden. He did not yet know how heavy it would become. Chapter 2. The Storm and the Lonely Moor. Soon Tomodata rode forth, his armor shining, his sword at his side. He remembered his lord's words and kept his gaze forward. He spared no effort from his horse, urging it along narrow paths and across rolling fields. He passed through mountain passes, where the pines stood like dark sentinels, and through villages where smoke rose from thatched roofs. By the third day of his journey, the sky changed. Clouds gathered thickly, the wind sharpened. It was the 9th month, the time when typhoons prowl the seas and sweep inland. Rain began to fall, first in scattered drops, then in a torrent. Tomodata bowed his head, pulled his cloak close around him, and rode on. The wind screamed through the branches. The road dissolved into mud. Landmarks disappeared behind sheets of water. His horse stumbled and shivered, but obeyed his urging. By noon, the sky was as dark as evening, and by evening it was as dark as the deepest night. The samurai felt the world narrow to the circle of his own breath and the trembling body beneath him. At last, the horse could go no further. In a wild, trackless moor, it faltered and stopped. Tomodata dismounted. His own legs were numb, his mind dizzy. He pushed forward on foot, stumbling through bogs and thorny scrub. Cold penetrated to his bones. Loneliness pressed upon his heart. In that desolation he thought of his lord's mission and cried out in despair. Was he to die nameless in this waste, leaving the Lord of Noto's trust unfulfilled? Just then, the wind shifted. The black clouds broke apart, swept away as if by invisible hands. A full moon rode clear in the sky, casting silver light over the sodden land. By its glow, Tomodata saw to his right a small hill that he had not noticed before. On its crest stood a thatched cottage, smoke curling faintly from a roof opening. In front of the house grew 3 willow trees, their young branches trailing like green streamers. The sight was as comforting as a lamp seen from far at sea. Tomodata thanked the gods and climbed the hill, his heart renewed. Chapter 3. The Cottage Beneath the Willows. As he approached, the willow branches swayed, scattering drops of water that sparkled in the moonlight. He tied his weary horse to one of the trees and called for shelter. The door opened at once. An old woman stood there, her clothes plain but clean, her eyes sharp yet kind. She asked who would be traveling on such a night and what he sought. Tomodata introduced himself as a samurai in the service of the Lord of Noto on important business. He asked humbly for food and shelter for himself and his horse, for the love of the gods. As he spoke, rainwater streamed from his garments, and fatigue made him sway. The old woman's sternness melted into compassion. She urged him inside toward the warmth of the fire. Their cottage was simple, a hearth, rough mats, a low table. By the flames sat the old man, her husband, who rose and bowed. Together they offered Tomodata dry clothing, warm rice wine, and what food they had. "You have already given your horse into good hands," the old woman added. Tomodata turned in surprise. There, just outside the door, in the dim light, stood a young girl holding his horse's rein. Her clothes and hair were blown by the lingering wind. Her presence seemed like part of the night itself. He wondered how she had appeared so quietly, but before he could speak, the old woman drew him fully inside and shut the door. Gradually, the chill left his limbs. As his hosts busied themselves, the young girl came in and slipped behind a screen to comb her hair and change her damp garments. He heard the soft rustle of cloth, the faint sound of a comb moving through long tresses. Then she emerged. Chapter 4. The Green Willow's Eyes. The girl was perhaps 15. She wore a simple blue robe woven from homespun cotton, and her feet were bare. Her long black hair was unlike that of most maidens, who bound their locks in careful knots. This girl's hair fell loose and straight, framing her face and flowing down to her knees like a dark waterfall. Her skin was clear, her form slender and graceful. To Tomodata, weary and chilled, she seemed the loveliest being he had ever seen. She moved quietly, carrying bowls and cups, kneeling to tend the fire, refilling dishes for the stranger. Finally, she took up the wine bottle in both hands and knelt beside him to pour. She bowed her head as she worked, so that he saw mainly the smooth line of her cheek and the fall of her hair. Tomodata remembered his lord's strange warning not to look any maiden straight in the eyes. He tried to keep his gaze on the fire. Yet when she had finished pouring and set down the flask, curiosity and something deeper drew his eyes to her. She looked up at the same moment. Their gaze met. In that meeting, the world's storms seemed to fall away. He asked, in a voice more gentle than he had intended, what her name might be. She answered softly that people called her Green Willow. The name touched him. It matched the trees outside and something supple in her nature. He murmured that no name could be dearer to him. Because he looked at her so long, a blush rose to her face, spreading from chin to forehead. She smiled, but tears trembled on her lashes, as if some unseen emotion had been stirred. Tomodata's heart beat swiftly. Somewhere far away in Noto, his Lord's words lay like forgotten ink on forgotten paper. Chapter 5. Songs Before the Fire. That night, although he lay upon a mat in the warmth of the hearth, Tomodata could not sleep. Fatigue tugged at him, but his thoughts circled around the image of Green Willow. Duty and desire wrestled inside him, and neither could prevail. At last he did what poets often do when they cannot bear their feelings. He shaped them into a small song, a tanka, in which he spoke of the coming dawn when he must leave, and wondered whether the maiden wished him gone or not. In his imagination, he pictured asking her why she blushed if she knew that he would soon ride away. If she had heard him, perhaps she would have replied with another verse, promising never to let him go if wishes could rule the sunrise. In the silence, it seemed to him that such a song reached him from the other side of the screen, though whether it was real or composed in his own heart, he could not tell. As the fire burned low, he sighed her name again and again. Yet when the first gray light crept into the room, he forced himself to rise. He was still a samurai. He left a purse of gold beside the sleeping old man in thanks for their hospitality. Behind the screen, the mother and daughter lay quiet. Tomodata saddled and bridled his horse. The storm had passed. The world looked newly washed. Grass and leaves glittered with moisture. The sky was pale and clear. Autumn flowers brightened the path. He rode away slowly. Though his body moved forward, his heart lingered at the hill with the 3 willows. At every milestone, he whispered, Green Willow, as if the name itself might summon her. That night, exhausted, he took shelter in a deserted roadside shrine. The place was holy and still. There, at last, sleep claimed him for a few hours. Chapter 6. The Choice of the Heart. At dawn, Tomodata woke, intending to wash in a nearby stream before continuing his mission. As he stepped out from the shrine's threshold, he stopped abruptly. On the ground before him lay a figure, face down, hair spread like ink on paper. It was Green Willow. Her slender body shook with sobs. She lifted a hand and seized his sleeve, calling him "my lord," and weeping as if her heart would break. Tomodata looked down at her and felt something within him give way. Without hesitation, he lifted her in his arms. He set her upon his horse in front of him, holding the reins with one hand and her waist with the other. They rode through the day without caring where the road led. They scarcely noticed villages or fields, mountains or rivers. The sun rose and set, the wind changed, but for them there was only the joy of being together. All thoughts of duty slipped away. They forgot the Lord of Noto's charge, the warning about maiden's eyes, the expectations of parents and ancestors. In their hearts there lived only one fierce, simple desire, never to be parted. Alas, this is often the way of love. Chapter 7. The House of Falling Water. By evening, they found themselves entering a city neither of them knew. Tomodata had enough gold and jewels concealed in his girdle to procure comfort. They rented a small house built of pale wood, its floors covered with clean white mats. The rooms were dim and cool, lit softly by paper lanterns. From the garden came the constant murmur of a little waterfall, a sound that soothed their spirits. Swallows flew in and out through the lattice, stitching the air with their swift wings. Here, Tomodata and Green Willow made a home. The outside world faded. News of Noto and its lord did not reach them. They lived as if afloat on an island of time, knowing and caring for nothing beyond their shared days. For them, 3 years passed like a chain of fragrant blossoms, spring after spring with its fresh leaves, summers heavy with perfume, autumns painted in red and gold, winters softened by shared warmth. Sometimes Tomodata would compose verses in which he likened his beloved to the graceful willow trees, pliant yet strong, bending in the wind, yet never breaking. Green Willow listened and laughed, her long hair brushing his shoulder. For a while, it seemed that they had escaped the world's demands. Chapter 8. The Trembling of the Tree. In the third autumn of their life together, a full moon rose large and clear. Tomodata and Green Willow went out into the garden at dusk to watch it ascend over the tiled roofs. The air held that sharp sweetness that comes just before the cold. As the moon lifted, silver light poured over them. Suddenly, Tomodata felt his beloved's body tense beside him. She began to tremble. Her hands shook. Her lips lost their color. He drew her closer, thinking it was only the chill wind. He wrapped his arm around her and urged her to go inside. But Green Willow cried out, a long, piercing cry that seemed to carry all the sorrow of the world. Then her strength failed, and she drooped against him. Tomodata, terrified, carried her to the stream that ran beyond their house. Tall iris leaves like green swords rose along the banks, and round lotus leaves floated upon the water like shields. He dipped his hand into the cold stream and bathed her forehead. He begged her to tell him where her pain lay. Her eyes opened faintly. In a whisper, she spoke of a tree. "They have cut it down," she murmured. "The willow, my tree, remember the green willow." Her voice faded. Her body grew strangely light in his arms. He felt her slipping away, not as a mortal woman dies, but as if mist were dissolving in sunlight. Desperate, he clutched tighter, but when he looked, he held only a pile of her garments and sandals, warm and sweet with her scent, yet empty of life. Green Willow herself had vanished. Chapter 9. The Three Stumps. Tomodata knelt in the garden, stunned. The garments rustled faintly in the night wind. He understood then what his heart had always half known, that Green Willow was no ordinary maiden. She had been the spirit of a willow tree, perhaps one of those three that had sheltered him on the stormy night long ago. While her tree stood living upon that lonely hill, she had been able to take human form and share his days. When the tree was cut down, her life in this world ended. His love had been bound to living wood and sap, to the whisper of leaves. Later, overcome with grief and guilt, Tomodata turned from the path of the warrior. He became a wandering holy man, moving from shrine to shrine on bare feet. He recited sutras, helped the poor, and sought to atone for his broken duty. In this way, he gained spiritual merit, but his heart never completely forgot. One evening, years later, he found himself again on a lonely moor. The light was fading. The wind carried the scent of wet grass. On his right, he noticed a small hill. Upon it stood the ruins of a thatched cottage, its door hanging crooked on a broken latch. Before the house were 3 old stumps, remnants of willow trees long since cut down. Moss covered them. No branches stirred. Tomodata stood for a long time, silent. Past and present flowed together. He saw again the old couple's warm fire, the young girl's bare feet and long hair. He remembered the 3 living trees tossing their branches in the typhoon. Quietly, he began to recite the song he had once made for Green Willow, the song about the dawn and the blush on her cheeks. His voice trembled, but the words came. When he finished, he sighed at his own folly. "A foolish song," he murmured. "The gods forgive me. I should be chanting prayers for the dead." Yet perhaps, somewhere beyond sound, Green Willow heard and smiled. Closing reflection: love, duty, and the living world. The story of Tomodata and Green Willow twines duty and desire like strands of a rope. At first he is the perfect samurai, ready to ride into danger and even death for his lord. One glance into a pair of dark eyes, however, and the certainty of that path begins to unravel. For 3 years he lives as if in a dream, choosing love over obligation. In the end, love itself proves fragile. It cannot hold her spirit when the living tree is cut. Tomodata is left with both loss and memory, and he responds by turning toward a different kind of duty, a duty to compassion and spiritual practice. Green Willow, too, embodies something deeper. She is both maiden and tree, reminding us that the natural world is not mere scenery, but alive, sensitive, and sometimes painfully bound to our actions. To cut down a tree, in this tale, is to sever a life and a love. Perhaps the story invites us to consider the promises we make, those to our leaders, those to our hearts, and those unspoken to the living earth. How do we honor them when they pull us in different directions? As you drift towards sleep, you might think of your own green willows, people or places that once sheltered you that may no longer be present, yet still sway gently in your memory. May those memories bring not only sorrow, but also a quiet gratitude, like the sound of leaves moving in a soft evening wind. This is your narrator Ali, thanking you for listening to this tale of storm, love, and loss, and wishing you a night of peaceful dreams beneath kindly branches. For more stories that can help you relax, don't forget to like and subscribe.